Yeah, I'll do that. Hey, what's up, everybody? Cecil Lammey caught me off guard a little bit. It is the Audible Live tonight. Me and Matt Waldman hanging out, talking a little football. Maybe we'll take our shirts off. I don't know where we'll go with tonight's program, but it'll go lots of places. Yeah. Sigmund Bloom on assignment. He might be without a shirt on right now, but we've got a lot to get to, Matt, with rookie mini camps coming up. And of course, before we jump in, just want to let everybody know if you haven't picked it up yet, rookie scouting portfolio, also with the post-draft update, Matt, something that I know a lot of your readers and fans really look forward to.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround from the draft, and I put out a re-ranking of those players now based on where they landed and give you an analysis of the current depth chart, including just contract situations in terms of when those deals should expire within the next year or two, at least from those guys who are on the roster. So you get a chance to kind of see clearly what type of path these rookies have in order to compete for contributing time on the field, and just kind of give you my thoughts about where I think those guys landed, where it was a good fit or bad fit, or where you need to be a little bit more patient, but the dividends are good. And with the cheat sheet, you get some ADP analysis. So you get a chance to look at where the sweet spot is between where I rank the players and then also where people are picking them, so that if you agree with me on some of the rankings, you can kind of gauge that so you can get the most value out of them, but not get sniped, or at least lower the risks of that happening.
Before we jump into some of the rookie minicamp stories, just going through the news and notes around the NFL, I was going to start here, Matt. I was going to start with CJ Anderson going to the Carolina Panthers. This was actually a good spot for him. Now, the contract, 1 year, all that's not what this discussion is about. But if we just look at merely where could he have the most value for fantasy owners, Carolina is a really good destination, as he'll take over the Jonathan Stewart role. Fozzie Whitaker goes on IR today, Matt. So some Carolina backfield news there with Christian McCaffrey, who's added a little bit more body armor this offseason. Christian McCaffrey, looking to get more work between the tackles or just more carries overall, just kind of hold up a little bit better. I know a lot of people, still say, oh, well, he's just Reggie Bush. And I'm like, just Reggie Bush is pretty damn good. And now you couple him with CJ Anderson. The roles are clear. The roles are clearly defined, and Anderson gets an opportunity to prove himself yet again. But then this time with real free agency, not we'll keep you around until you show up and then we'll release you. No hard feelings, but he's got real free agency coming up this next time around, where perhaps he could get back into that $4 million range where he was with the Denver Broncos. Let's discuss Anderson. And how do you think he'll fit? Is he truly just a plug-in Jonathan Stewart's numbers, and that's what you're going to get from Anderson? Is it more? Is it less? And what about McCaffrey in 2018?
Well, I mean, I think that when you look at this team, the first bet's going to go towards McCaffrey getting an enhanced role. That's the hope. And, the fact that he's bulking up and trying to take on more and be that dual threat back, that's the aim, and that's going to be the player's aim. That's why he's doing that. He wants to prove to the Panthers that he can be that guy. But the Panthers as a team, they're smart enough to go, we need somebody to replace Jonathan Stewart, and someone who can kind of deliver a combo of what Mike Tolbert used to deliver, as well as Jonathan Stewart. And we know CJ Anderson can function for us in the red zone. We also know that he's a very good third down back who can catch the ball well out of the backfield. So he gives us some continuity of being an every down back if McCaffrey gets hurt. But I also think that it does ease the pressure from having to lean on McCaffrey the entire game. And so I think that, yeah, you're probably plugging in Stewart numbers, but maybe a little bit more in the area of receptions if they've watched enough tape of the Broncos, and the coaching staff agrees with the scouting staff that this is a guy that they can feature a little bit more in the passing game and maybe use him in the backfield at the same time, because then they can move McCaffrey outside or in the slot and do a little bit more work where, they find the best matchups for him. So I wouldn't be overly optimistic about him being, a top 20 fantasy threat this year, unless, injuries hit. But I think from a perspective of his value to you in the, somewhere after the 9th round, 8th or 9th round of a draft, he's a guy you definitely want to target, because that's the time where you're looking for talented players who whose teams understand how to use them if the situation arises for them to get that volume. And I think that he's probably one of the A1 candidates for that particular role. It's a very good fit.
Running back talk abounds when you look at the Giants. We knew this was happening with Paul Perkins, but Saquon Barkley, I've often said, well, you've got a 230-pound Christian McCaffrey, in a way, not as violent. You know, the people that say we haven't seen this talent at running back since Adrian Peterson, I trust they're not saying like he's Adrian Peterson, because he's not, Matt, and you know that well. You've chronicled it through the rookie scouting portfolio. But when you look at Barkley now, I mean, clearly he's the man. But are we also talking about, you know, a 1,200-yard rusher and 75 catches, you know, so it's kind of a plus level for what Kamara did last year, and certainly McCaffrey did last year as well.
It's very possible. And when you look at the Giants system, Pat Shurmur is going to be running a lot of outside zone, which I actually like a lot for Barkley, because he's a guy who likes to go outside anyway when he gets the chance. Why not have him heading that direction in the beginning a little bit more and having the chance to cut back inside or bounce it even further, and have him feel like he's using his speed as that primary weapon, and then he can use the cutbacks as a changeup, as opposed to always taking it between the tackles. And I mean, it doesn't mean they're always going to run to the outside on every play. It's just that for Shurmur actually called more outside zone plays in Minnesota. They had a higher percentage of outside zone plays that they ran last year than any team in the league. So you can see how that fit works, and also with the way that the team will spread the field, and it'll be kind of a power spread type of look in terms of the concepts that they run. So he's gonna get some of the things that he saw at Penn State, and hopefully with better blocking, so that he will have the chance to be a consistently strong playmaker, you know, both as a receiver and a runner. And because he's a very good blocker, he's going to be able to stay on the field. And I think that having Jonathan Stewart as his, you know, someone is kind of a mentor, at least an elder statesman in that running back room, is a terrific fit. Because we think about post-injury Jonathan Stewart, but Jonathan Stewart's the reason why the Spark score became a thing, because he was a complete freak in terms of, think of Emmitt Smith, but about, 25, 30 pounds heavier and faster in terms of long speed, but just as quick. That was what Jonathan Stewart was coming out of Oregon. And he looked like he was going to be every bit of that in his first couple of years in the league, until the injuries kind of robbed him of what he really truly could have been. It's kind of like, you know, you watch Jonathan Stewart maybe about 4 to 5 years ago and think about how good he was, you know, some of the moments that he'd have, and you go, I wish we could get more of that. It's kind of what Frank Gore could have been without 2 knee injuries. It's the same kind of dynamic there, except it was an even greater loss, I think, for Stewart, even though the injuries don't seem as dramatic for what he went through. But he's a guy that leaned on his athletic ability, or had that A+ athletic ability, and he's someone that can relate to Barkley. There aren't many backs who could do that, but I think Jonathan Stewart can. So if Barkley does have any of those moments of, I feel like I have to take everything on my shoulders and do what Reggie did early in his career by trying to reverse field too much and cut back and bounce out, and not just be disciplined to what the design of the play is based on what the situation really calls for, so that you can get those hard yards. I think Stewart's a guy who can say, look, man, I've been where you've been. You've got to do this. It's not going to help anybody. And I think that he's a guy that can engender that respect from someone like Barkley, because Barkley can probably, you know, at the very worst, they could have a conversation. I think Barkley would learn real quick, if he didn't know who Stewart was or could have been, that, you know, that he could go, wow, okay, I get it now. And it's a guy that, yeah, I think is very capable of being a 500, 600-yard receiver early on.
A little history lesson always goes a long way. And what that situation reminds me of, Matt, is something that the Chiefs got with Thomas Jones and Jamal Charles, because we remember Jamal Charles always to the corner store, always to the corner store. That was his game at Texas. It's what he tried to do as a rookie. What do you have, like 300 yards his rookie year, what have you? Enter Thomas Jones. Now all of a sudden, Charles is learning that you can run inside without taking contact. You can run inside because essentially it's like the quarterback looking off the safety. Like you're making the safeties move by going inside. Linebackers are often taught to look for shoulders in the direction that you're going to go. So they're kind of peeking around their blocker and they're looking for your shoulder dip to see which way you go. Charles learned to be an inside out runner and flourished and was one of the best runners of his time when he was healthy. You get that from Barkley from day one. You get that sort of impact from day one. You also get better weapons around Eli Manning, which Mike from the chat room reacting to me says, how much will Barkley actually help Manning? When you look at this situation, Matt, are you maybe excited about Manning? Should they have moved on? Of course, it's Kyle Lauletta, Davis Webb. There's not a lot there. I know Lauletta had some Romo comparisons, but we saw him at the Senior Bowl. Wasn't like when we saw Jimmy Garoppolo at the Senior Bowl. That was something that was worth noting. When you saw Russell Wilson when he wasn't puffing up to me, like at the Senior Bowl, we've seen some Senior Bowl quarterbacks where you go, let's keep an eye on that guy. Didn't necessarily see that from Kyle Lauletta. Wasn't bad during the week by any means, but just I think people have fallen in love a little bit too much with him, Matt. We can discuss that. But how does Barkley actually help Eli Manning? And from a fantasy perspective, how does that work out?
Well, as long as the line stays healthy this year and the upgrades that they made work out and everything gels, I think it helps out a lot. Because
why is Eric Flowers mad that they picked up Nate Solder? It's like, come on, bro. Come on. Like, they're not asking you to move to guard yet.
Right.
Because Eric Flowers has always been Orlando Franklin. That was his game in college at the U, by the way, where Orlando Franklin went. I think he's a guard, but at least he's a right tackle. I mean, show up and play right tackle. Let Nate Solder play left, and he's just better than you.
Yeah, it's just that competitive fire. And I think that we have to expect young guys who have gotten to this level that they don't take, changes very well, even though they're told they're supposed to. We always hear that too. In the job interview phase, it's always like, I'll do whatever. I'll clean helmets. I'll be the best helmet cleaner ever. And then once they get established into the league a bit, that changes a little bit, just like anybody who gets established to do a job.
And Matt, to interject here, because I think it's fascinating. You and I have had a journey through the football community. And, it's not like we're done or anything like that, but we've worked hard to get to this point. And whenever we get to like, I want to do what you do, it's like, well, prepare for a lot of sleepless nights, prepare to work multiple jobs, prepare to do stuff that people wouldn't normally do or don't want to do, or think that you got a little bit of success, so I shouldn't be doing this radio hit for free, or whatever the answer is to whatever your journey is. It's like that in the NFL. It's like that in the job interview phase. Like you said, like, hey, I really want this. Do you really want this? Because if you do, and if you're a guy like Eric Flowers, like if you really want to play in the NFL, it's not going to be at left tackle anymore.
Yeah. And it's a balance, it's a balance between understanding your value and standing up for your value, and also understanding that you're being a team player and when you need to be a team player. And that's a tough lesson for some to learn at some point. So, looking at this though, as long as that line is intact, they should have more run pass balance. And I understand that, from a statistical standpoint, or at least from some folks who are doing some of the statistical studies saying that the run game doesn't matter. I think they need to incorporate a little bit more adversarial process and more chaos theory, or more game theory into the equation when they're doing some of this, because there is cause and effect in terms of how defenses play certain alignments and certain things when they expect run. And even though the data of the stats may seem like a good correlation to whether the run is important or not, I think that they could dive a little bit deeper there, because I think what they're finding is, if you really looked at the data, they're not really finding anything of value at that point. And you have to understand that it's not a swipe against data, people, that you just got to make sure that data is placed in a good context, and that you're being honest about what that data can or cannot show. And when you're looking at the run game, the run game is very important in setting up the pass. It's, the way that linebackers read play action, the way that they read certain alignments, and they cheat up to be able to play, gives receivers an edge in their route running. It gives a quarterback an edge in terms of how he can bait a defender and how he, during his drop to set up routes. And that may not show up in yards per catch or any other metric that you use to measure the success of the play. It's about the process and how that process influences another process. And it may be 2 or 3 processes linked together that create that. And when you look at the run game with Saquon Barkley, his threat to break a play wide open or to be able to make the first or second man miss and force defenses to play more men at the line of scrimmage does create a numbers advantage in the passing game. And that's where his advantage is going to come into play, especially if when they switch things up and use him more in the screen game, or they use him more where they split him outside. And it may only be one play every 3 or 4 weeks where he makes a huge, and it may not even be that many. It may be one play. Say, let's say by mid-September, he's caught, 8 passes and they've been screen passes and he had like maybe a 20-yard gain on one of those. Well, that 120-yard gain is going to be shown in every opponent's film room about what he could be and how that 20-yard gain actually led to a touchdown that actually created a lead that that the team never overcame. And then if he has maybe one play that breaks a long one, that one play, the reverberation of that play is felt in every coach's office, because it's not so much that he's going to do it again and again and again and again. It's just the threat of it, because in the NFL that if you give an inch to your opponent, they will take a mile. So you have to be ultra careful with each of those little things. And that's enough. It's kind of the whole idea of, nuclear war, and the idea that, I don't remember the name of the theory, but everyone, both Russia and the United States both felt like that, it's an unwinnable situation, but it's just like one little thing kind of crept everything up a little bit more. It's kind of like that in the way that, people play games. And it's that kind of thing where just little increments can make a big difference in terms of how you approach your strategy.
We're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns situation next, because Christopher Butler in the chat room wants to know, how does Chubb, Todd Haley, and the running mentality of Hugh Jackson help take the pressure off Baker Mayfield in year one, and vice versa with that O-line? Now, they've been sticking to it, Matt. They've been sticking to we're going to start with Tyrod Taylor. I get it. I understand. But Baker is the type of the guy. And by the way, Tim MC says mutual destruction theory. I should have known that as a Megadeth fan. Anyway, back on Baker Mayfield, talk about mutual destruction. He's going to destroy all the old philosophies about the Cleveland Browns. Well, that's at least what they're hoping. And Baker's the type of guy, you want to talk about competitiveness, because Eric Flowers is bitching about Nate Solder. Sorry, Joe. Okay. Baker Mayfield says, hold my beer, because he's not going to sit. He's not going to sit still. He's going to be antsy about getting into the starting lineup. And I dig that about Baker Mayfield. I don't hold that against Baker Mayfield whatsoever. Talk to him a little bit, Senior Bowl, Combine, etc. Not that I know the guy, but just being around him, knowing his mannerisms, knowing his agent really well, because it's Mike Pritchard's agent, by the way. Just knowing the guy. He's not just going to sit there, Matt. He's not going to sit there and Tyrod's a starter. He's not taking a red shirt. This isn't Paxton Lynch playing Call of Duty 96 hours in a month. This is Baker Mayfield wanting to make it his duty to make sure the Browns aren't duty anymore. How many duties can I mix into this tape, Matt? But when I look at Nick Chubb and then Todd Haley and just that offense in general, we've got the Corey Coleman. There's been some news items. Make sure you subscribe to our footballguys.com free newsletter. It comes out every day after the draft. It starts every day. News from around the league with our Football Guys takes. So make sure to subscribe. It's free, and it gives you all the top stories. I was writing about the Corey Coleman. Hey, he's on the block basically if someone came at him with the right offer. And you think of Landry and Gordon. You think of Njoku there. And Baker Mayfield's going to have some tools at his disposal. So while they say, it's Tyrod Taylor, he's our guy for the start anyway, I don't believe it. I don't buy it. Not that they're lying, just that Baker Mayfield will not rest until he's the starter. Baker Mayfield isn't going to just sit back and say, I'm the man, I'm okay not being the man. He's going to do everything in his power to be the man. So how does that work with Chubb, Hugh Jackson, and Todd Haley running things for Cleveland?
Well, I mean, I think for starters, it just does start with Todd Haley. The fact that he's going to have total control of that offense is a good thing. He's a fairly flexible guy in terms of, being able to adjust system to his players and try and work that out. He's also a guy who will use some more spread concepts, and I think that he'll understand how to work with Mayfield to get the most out of what his strengths are. And I think the same will apply to Tyrod Taylor in that respect. I think it's good that the team is at least trying to give the impression and also willing to believe that Tyrod Taylor will be the starter to begin. And I think the reason is that it's nice to be able to give their rookie a luxury to be able to sit a year if possible, or at least part of the year. And I think that they're trying to keep the expectations a little bit lower, which is something that they didn't do with DeShone Kizer. And I think that you can look around the league and saw what Mike McCarthy had to say about Kizer, and also what came out about Kizer not having a veteran quarterback in the room and calling up other quarterbacks just to get advice and describing the situation. They're like, dude, that I've never heard of a situation like that in the NFL. Like you're in a bad spot, basically. And he really did. He had one good quarter in a preseason game where he showed some of the things he did at Notre Dame that were good. And next thing you know, he's going to be the starter. And then he struggles. And while he doesn't struggle at a horrific level, he actually kept some games fairly close. There were some moments where he did look pretty good. He made mistakes and he got thrown under the bus. And it was like, see you, you're not worth it. And so he got treated pretty badly. And I don't know, it's hard to say who specifically, did all that. Was that Hugh Jackson? Was it the past GM? Was it the owner? Was it a combination of different individuals? All I know is that a guy like John Dorsey, I think, has seen enough and been around enough that he's more willing to say, look, it's my first year. We're gonna wash away Kizer, not because of the fact, it may be because of the fact they thought he was not good enough, or it was just the fact that Dorsey probably looked at the situation and said, this is toxic and it's better just to start anew and give this kid, for his talent, a chance to actually reset his career. And let's start again here. And I can kind of manage things in a way so that this doesn't get out of hand. And I think that that's really where this is that it's more bred from the caution from what happened last year. And if Baker Mayfield proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's ready to start and that they feel like he can take his lumps, and on top of it, part of taking your lumps is getting benched when you have a bad game or a bad quarter or two, and you can put in a veteran like Tyrod Taylor who's careful with the ball, can keep the game close, can run your offense and do a number of different things well, and still make some big plays for you, and do what I've talked about repeatedly about Marty Schottenheimer and Drew Brees being able to say, look, Baker, you messed up here. You were starting to get into some quicksand, and we didn't want you to lose your confidence. Maybe that's not exactly what we're going to say to him, but you were messing up here, and I need you to take a break from this game and watch what's going on and just calm down. And you're still our guy. Tyrod's in so that we can keep this close, or so we can get back into it and give you a chance to kind of reevaluate where you are and just calm down a bit. And if it gets close, we're going to bring you back in because we believe in you, or we'll just wait till next week. You'll be back in next week. We're not going to say it's up in the air whether you're going to be our starter or not. You are our future. You're our guy. But to me, intermittent play is a good way, of developing a quarterback at this level, because you don't, it's like with music, I talk all the time, when you have players getting up to, who are working in a group or a band and they're on stage, when you start, it's one thing to be playing college campuses. It's another thing you get up there in Carnegie Hall, or you go somewhere that's a world famous auditorium, and you've got, and the pressure to be up there is vastly different. And it would be not, they're not going to take someone who's that young or that inexperienced at this level of play and say, you know what, we're going to have you do basically a solo concert by yourself without any musicians accompanying you.
Accompaniment. Yeah.
Yeah, none at all. Just a cappella. You're just going to do it. You're just going to do stop time solos all by yourself and do like a 60-minute concert. I mean, there's like 5 guys in the world that are really good at being able to do things like that in certain areas of music, and they're virtuosos. You got to work your way up to that. And so, you may have someone who has that capability, but you say, you know what, we're going to give them a solo here. We're going to have them play this featured part here, but we're not going to have them take that leadership role right away. There's very rare. And part of that is it's that confidence level to be able to carry it, and knowing that when you make a mistake that you're not exposed on a level where, when you're doing a solo effort and you make a mistake, the whole thing falls apart. When you're in a band or in a group, if you make a mistake, there's a greater chance that it's a little covered up, and maybe someone with a really good discerning ear will know, but it's not something that's going to be catastrophic to the entire group. And that's where I think what they're doing with Tyrod Taylor and Baker Mayfield.
Well, and I'll say this, I'll tell you what else will cover some stuff up is Nick Chubb. And just go back and know pre-injury, this guy looked better than Gurley. This is a guy that very, very impressive. And it's kind of one of those Willis McGahee, Frank Gore. We know the stories. We know the backfields where it was like somebody gets hurt and the next guy comes in. You're like, oh, wow, he's really good. And he's like, better. We've been waiting for Chubb to come to the NFL for a minute now. And when you look at Nick Chubb and just his natural running style, if he can get back to pre-injury form, because people will look and people will misunderstand things about Nick Chubb on film and what they saw. But if we're talking pre-injury form Nick Chubb and knee injuries aren't as devastating as they once were, we're talking about a very, very special runner at the pro level.
Yeah. And, as I've talked about in the past, couple weeks, and really way before that, but people weren't listening until about draft time when it starts to come down. But I've said for a few years that this guy is probably, we've talked about Ezekiel Elliott, and I remember saying on this show years ago that there's a back in the league who might be better than in college, who might be better than Ezekiel Elliott if he continues to play at the level that I've seen from him early on, and that was Nick Chubb. And, I've loved Ezekiel Elliott's game. I mean, he's a terrific running back. He's a great running back, if you ask me. But Chubb has that same type of discipline between the tackles. And when you look at his contact balance, he's got as good, if not better, contact balance than Ezekiel Elliott. He is a good pass protector, not as good as Sony Michel or Saquon Barkley. But then when you look at his ability, his quickness, the 20 shuttle and the 3-cone drill types of times, your acceleration and change of direction quickness. If you compare his to Barkley's, it's barely different. It's like hundreds of a second different at most. And this is a guy coming off 2 years ago, 3 ligament tears in the knee, and came back in 9 months. And the only issue he didn't really probably look the same was that he had some compensatory injuries during that year after his first game back, where he carried the ball over 30 times against North Carolina. So it's like the injuries I'm not concerned about. I watched so much film of him this past year because I knew I had him rated so high before the injury. And I watched more film on him than any back I've ever watched, and there's a danger that there could be some bias with that. But what I saw was this past year, very little difference in his burst and change of direction speed than what I saw from him as a freshman. If anything, what I saw less of as a senior was that I saw him see fewer 5- and 6-man fronts that he faced as a freshman,
right,
and ripped them to shreds because they didn't know who he was. And by the time they found out, he was basically breaking SEC records. So when he came back from his injury, teams were like, oh, well, we're not going to be fooled. We're going to stack these boxes every time you get in the game. And because Georgia's like, we want to keep recruiting running backs of great quality, we don't want to just have Sony Michel transfer. We want him to be a big part of this team. And when Mark Richt's like, look, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb was our Heisman candidate. Sony Michel might be our best offensive player. That tells you the conundrum they had. So they looked at this and said, well, Michel can catch just like Chubb, but maybe even a little bit better, out on the outside. And he's our best pass protector. So Nick Chubb, he's our better inside runner than Sony Michel. And you look at those two things and say, well, that's how we're going to play this a little bit more. We're going to lean more towards that. And teams eventually looked at the tape and said, you know what, when Chubb's in the game, probably 6 to 7 times out of 10, he's going to be running it up the middle. And he's going to be a guy that's he's more of a threat to turn a short, a run in a packed box into a normal front into a big play because of his contact balance and burst. So let's go ahead and stack this. Whereas with Michel, we kind of know he's more of a threat in the passing game as a pass protector. They're using him more in that regard. And while his speed is worrisome, we're a little more worried about Chubb in that respect. And so when you look at the fronts, that tells your story more than, because I got some people early who were like, how can you, there's somebody on Twitter who basically said to me, how can you say Nick Chubb, has acceleration because in the Alabama game, he couldn't get outside. And I'm like, well, if you watch the Alabama game, what you'll notice is that the fronts that he faced were able to get penetration in the backfield and tackle him before anybody could make a move and bounce it outside. And Michel was in the game. They weren't playing those as heavy of fronts, and it was more of passing down situations, and they weren't expecting him to run. And if they were like, we'll catch him in time of this 3rd and 18 or, the 3rd and 12 or, whatever play it was a long yardage play where he bounced it outside and outran one guy, that was a seminal play in his highlight reel in his career. But that's not a situation where they're going, we're going to defend the run in that play.
Right. It's something that when Mark Schlereth was watching Sony Michel, he was really concerned. He's like, he doesn't face a lot of loaded fronts. I said, that's true. And here's why. And went into the Chubb theory with Stink and was also like, but watch Michel finish.
Yep.
Like, watch him finish violently.
Yep.
So while I agree, and that's why I've said there's LaShawn McCoy to his game, because McCoy at Pitt, people may not remember, he was that ankle breaker guy in space, but he'd also try to lower his shoulder and get after you a little bit. And that's what I love to see about Sony Michel. Both the backs, very talented, but don't anyone sleep on the talent of Nick Chubb.
No. And I think the thing is that maybe the Browns will at first, depending on how well Chubb adapts to pass protections year one. And if he adapts well and takes it over in camp, then you can probably bet on him becoming the starter within the first month of the season. If he has any minor injuries or he has some struggles, like say Kareem Hunt did, he'll probably get into the mix and have to, and maybe used as part of a committee unless an injury happens to Hyde or Duke Johnson. And so, fantasy owners who are just thinking about the here and now will probably say, well, that's what I'm concerned about. He's not that much better than Carlos Hyde. But Carlos Hyde is a very, very good back. But, Nick Chubb is a guy that, listen, when, I've said it again here before, but, when Todd Haley knows what he has. He had Le'Veon Bell and he had Jamal Charles. And he understands that the three things that these three players have in common are excellent balance, great change of direction, speed. Actually, have more things in common than that. Great acceleration and excellent vision. They see the field really well. And all three of them have breakaway speed too. Maybe not the level Charles did, but they can all pull away. And the first thing that he said to Chubb after Dorsey congratulated Chubb for being that you're our pick, handed the phone to Hugh. Hugh said a few words and handed it to Haley. And Haley said, I like guys who can break it from anywhere on the field. You are my kind of guy. You don't say that to a back that people are saying, well, we hope it comes back. I watched him against South Carolina this year, against Kentucky this year, and I saw plays where it looked like he teleported from one part of the sideline past a linebacker where the angle made no sense whatsoever. And it's just the burst was that palpable And I would put it up there against anything that I saw from Saquon Barkley in terms of that acceleration. And when you look at the combine times, you could put it up there against everything. And all you could get was say, well, maybe Barkley was a half a step faster at most, and I mean, you're talking about hundreds of a second different. So, and the thing is, when you look at this in total, he's more of a long-term play because of the history of the Browns and the skepticism we should all probably approach this team with until they've proven something. But, I think that this is probably, I think this was their best pick in the draft in terms of talent. I think he was one of the best talents in this draft. And he's the closest back that I've seen to Frank Gore before Frank Gore's injury. And, Larry Coker said, the best back I ever recruited out of high school, the best high school back I ever saw was Frank Gore. And he recruited Barry Sanders at Oklahoma State.
Enough said. It is the Audible Live Thursday nights right here on YouTube, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Sigmund Bloom on assignment, Dr. Jene Bramel as well, taking some time off. And it's me and Matt Waldman talking football and taking your questions in the chat room. So keep reacting to me. And many thanks to you guys, especially our Colorado viewers and listeners now, saying Space Explorer, thank you. Tim MC, thank you. Kenny Pops, Rocky Mountain Overland. Thank you all, guys, everyone in the chat room for participating. You want your question answered? We got about 20 minutes left in the show. Some discussion about Jordan Wilkins there, Bloom. And I guess our friend, Mike Clay, really loves him. So let's discuss this situation. And, I haven't seen anything Mike said about Wilkins, but just in looking at that backfield and writing about it for the newsletter, Marlon Mack there, Nyheim Hines, kind of the player without the position, because is he a slot receiver? He's a little bit more Curtis Samuel, and not Jalen Samuels, by the way, but a little bit more Curtis Samuel in my eyes, because it's like, well, he could do this, but he also could do that. Maybe he's better just playing slot. So Nyheim Hines there, Wilkins there, Mack there. Who emerges? Could it be Wilkins from that Colts backfield?
I think it could be. I think from the standpoint of burst, change of direction, agility, vision, and balance, he's the best runner, best ball carrier on that team. I think that he has that kind of talent. His vision is kind of Arian Foster, Matt Forte like. He is a good, patient cutback runner who sees gap end zone plays really well, and he has that quickness to change direction. He has more of that Arian Foster lack of speed compared to Matt Forte when Forte was in his prime, but he's that kind of player who can finish strong and take on first level and second level defenders, but he's also a guy that can make them miss in the backfield, and he's very savvy about how he sets up runs. I mean, in a way that I thought his vision was, probably top 5 caliber out of the backs in this class. It was that good. The issue with Jordan Wilkins is that he has to learn how to pass protect, and it's not so much learn. I've joked, I've kind of joked in the rookie scouting portfolio that, we've heard about leadership and how leadership is more of a thermostat than a light switch. You can't turn it on and off. It just has to be a constant thing. And his pass protection is more of a light switch than it is a thermostat right now. And I've seen games where he's just failed to do it. He's almost got, just because I don't feel like blocking, and just kind of fake the funk. Like he got in the area and then just thought it's going to be okay. I'm in his way. I don't have to do anything more. And the quarterback getting sacked. And then on the exact next play, he has to deal with pressure from the same side, and he executes the block perfectly. And you're going, okay, dude, you know what to do. You just didn't do it here. And you see enough plays where he's not really following through all the way, because he doesn't. Most running backs say they don't like to pass protect. Outside of the job interview, after the job interview's over and you ask them, they're like, nah, it's not much fun. I don't like it. It's
Can't
painful.
you have the other guy do it? That's what they're saying. The chat room, by the way, wants a comparison with Marlon Mack. I would say there's a little bit more urgency with what Mac does and less of the natural fluidity that you see with Wilkins,
Yes.
because Mac has to do that. Mac has
Yes.
always been a hard charger. That's his style. He doesn't set things up. There's not that fluid. I'm going to wait a pause here and then burst through. It's just like, give me the ball, charge, charge, charge. That's the large difference. So
Yeah.
when we talk Mac versus Wilkins, let's discuss the positives and negatives.
Yeah. And so when you look at that, Marlon Mack is more like Darren McFadden. Put him behind a gap scheme like the Colts and say, here's the crease, hit it hard, and hopefully you break through and go. Marlon Mack can do that. He's got to hold on to the ball and learn how to pass protect. And he also has to learn to show a little bit more patience because they're not going to run gap all the time. Now, the thing is that they got the best guard in the draft, maybe the best player in the draft in Quentin Nelson. So if they get to run behind him pulling, he's going to make, he's going to basically, mincemeat look like, T-bone steak. So it's going to be a good situation for any of the backs in there. But if you want a more versatile, sound runner who understands how to really set things up, Jordan Wilkins is your guy. He's also a more powerful guy, and Marlon Mack does not break a lot of tackles. He has that top-heavy kind of Tevin Coleman-esque, Darren McFadden kind of shoulder lean where his head goes down and his body goes down right after that contact. And if you go back and watch any USF tape in third and short, you're going to see a lot of missed opportunities from him, because he just doesn't have that feel.
It's contact balance. It's being top heavy. It's like he is that hard charger, but he thinks that's his style to get through people instead of understanding you can set up things to have a glancing blow. You can set up things to actually keep running through contact. Like I'm just going to run as hard as I possibly can into this wall. Why can't I go through the wall?
Yeah, it starts with the feet, and it's like your feet process what your eyes see as a running back. And he just doesn't process on that type of a level. That's why the gap scheme's better for him. But you could see even last year, I think I showed on a Monday night game against the Broncos, 2 exact same plays ran in the same quarter on Monday night. And it was one where Mac didn't make the same patient press and cut that Gore did. And Gore got the first down on a play and a really nice gain in something where it was an even more difficult situation and than Mac actually had. And Mac lost yards in that on that play. And so it's that kind of thing that he has to learn, and he has to prove that he's developed this year. And if he can prove that, then you've got, a guy who catches passes really well with breakaway speed that Jordan Wilkins doesn't have. But they both have good enough acceleration. And Wilkins is his superior in agility and in vision in terms of decision making and in power. So it's going to be interesting whether if Wilkins gets the pass pro down, he could challenge. If he doesn't, then it's going to be the Mack and Turbin show with the sprinkling of Hines, and Wilkins is either cut on the practice squad or sitting on the bubble of the roster hoping to get a break.
It is the Audible Live Thursday nights, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Royce Freeman, Jonathan Stewart, he's certainly a better receiver than people give him credit for. He had more receptions than Kareem Hunt did in college. I'm going to see him tomorrow. The next 3 days, I'll be at Dove Valley. Very excited about that. Very excited also about something else we got to get to, Matt. So let's do this Freeman thing really quickly, and then I got some breaking news, I guess we should say.
That's cool. So, I mean, yeah, when you look at this, I like Freeman a lot. And would I say he's Jonathan Stewart? I mean, that's a pretty heady comparison based on talent. Maybe not what they did in the pros, but I'll say this: he's a plus version of CJ Anderson, and I like CJ Anderson a lot. I know you guys are buds, and you admire, and I'm with you. I mean, he's a guy I remember writing about in Cal going, keep an eye on this guy, right. Even though he's basically playing fullback in that system. But, Freeman is kind of the upgrade in terms of the athlete, and he's got really good feet. He's got underrated feet. And if he can be a little bit more patient, on certain types of runs, I think he'll be fantastic. I think he's the most underrated fantasy value of the running backs in this class. And I think that he's a guy that we'll be looking back at the end of the year and going, his production was right up there with the top 3 to 5 that everyone was talking about earlier.
Jordan asks if I got any luck getting Elway as my bowling partner since he cut C.J. Anderson. John and I are cool. Not gonna go bowling together. I'd love to if he would, but gonna throw a house party here in a week. Hope to get Peyton over here. So that's my name dropping for tonight. I will say this. They're back to liking Chad Kelly or liking him more. I had cautioned people, and I know, Matt, you're going to pump your fist. You're going to love this.
Yep.
I'd cautioned people a couple of months ago because, I want to pass on not everything that I hear, but just pass on enough stuff. And when everyone's like, Chad Kelly, I was like, let's slow down a little bit there, just based on some things. I know this. I know Gary Kubiak has a large mention of what happens in that room. We know they have fully committed in a way that people really didn't expect them to Case Keenum. They have committed to Keenum as their starter. They did not draft a quarterback at all, not a 7th rounder, they haven't picked up anybody undrafted. There's no camp arm in Denver, but tomorrow when I go to rookie minicamp, guess who's going to be there? Chad Kelly. Guess who I interacted with around the draft? Chad Kelly. Guess who's reshaped his body and is pretty fit and trim? Chad Kelly. Gone. He always had. You could always tell the guys that maybe had a little cold pops. You know what I mean? You could always tell that body type. Hell, I may have that body type, but he had a little dad bod to him, and not that he's the Hulk now, but you can definitely tell. Homeboy has trimmed up, has taken his conditioning seriously. I've already told people like Chad Kelly's, when the fellas are going out for some drinks and go dancing or whatever, and Kelly's like, I'm staying home. So hopefully he's learned that aspect of things. Told you about when I saw him throwing 70 yards into a bucket effortlessly last year when he was able to practice. Told you about a guy that would go out every day when he wasn't allowed to practice. He'd go out there by himself and run through the entire script of the day during practice when we were having our press conference with Vance Joseph. And Kelly was there by himself going through this on a daily basis. I've seen Chad Kelly do more work in a year than Paxton Lynch has done in 2.5. And now I would the best way I can say this is with Gary Kubiak's influence and Vance Joseph being empowered along with Case Keenum, by the way. When people would say something about, hey, we're getting a quarterback in the draft, right? Because everybody was saying Broncos going to get a quarterback. Vance Joseph would say, we've got our quarterback. And he might not have been talking about Case Keenum. I mean, now he was on the surface, and certainly he promotes Case Keenum and all those sorts of things. But I know that Chad Kelly was his favorite quarterback last year of all the quarterbacks in the class. In last year's class, which wasn't as good, but certainly Deshaun Watson, Pat Mahomes, we're all excited. Mitchell Trubisky, we're all excited about these kids. Gary Kubiak and that influence has perhaps changed the mind. Also, Paxton's not doing himself any favors. And by the way, at rookie minicamp tomorrow, where Chad Kelly will be, because he's able to participate, Paxton Lynch will not, because he's not able to participate. So even in walkthroughs, because I reached out to a team official today just to double check, Chad's going to be there, right? And not Paxton. And he's going to be there, but it's it's walkthroughs and it's meetings. But it's still chemistry with the young core. What people need to realize, and this is for dynasty owners, there is a young core in Denver coming up that will be Cortland Sutton. That'll definitely be Deshaun Hamilton. My God, what a steal they got with Deshaun Hamilton. Fantastic. Jake Butt. So there's this young core that's all going to be there at Dove Valley tomorrow with Chad Kelly, catching passes from the only quarterback that's allowed to participate, Chad Kelly, building chemistry with a guy that is Vance Joseph's favorite, Chad Kelly. And with a Gary Kubiak blessing, it seems like Chad Kelly might be more in the mix. Now, he's got to stay healthy. It's a big problem with him. The off-field stuff seems to be a bit behind him. Hopefully that's the case. Knock on wood, all those sorts of things, Matt. But I thought that you would be very excited to know that things in Denver are warming up around Chad Kelly because of Kelly. Not just because Lynch is a slappy and can't put the Xbox down, but because of Kelly, the support from the coach, Vance Joseph, And now Gary Kubiak and that influence. You're going to see Chad Kelly get that real shot. You're going to see Chad Kelly build a chemistry with this young core of very talented players. And I thought you'd be excited to kind of wrap up the show tonight with a little Chad Kelly talk.
Oh, absolutely. And I was getting more excited with every passing round when Chad Kelly was still on the team and no quarterback was leaving the board. After about round 2, I was like, this is looking pretty darn good if they don't pick another quarterback at this stage. And it doesn't look like they will. And you have to understand that when you talked about Chad Kelly remaking his body, that was something that I mentioned in the RSP last year, which is, from what I was told, the dad bod thing, a lot of that came down to a few things. Probably the immaturity went out, not taking care of his body as well as he could have. And also the fact that you're a college student and, you're not going to get that high quality fitness regimen probably at that.
Eating ramen point. And a bunch of Taco Bell is probably going to do that to you.
Right. So there's that. But at the same time, everyone talks about the knee injury. Everyone talks about the wrist injury. But what they really should have been focused on was the hernia, because he had hernia surgery and then played, with a quick recovery through that. And what I was told from his medicals is that the best thing that could happen to him is to get signed by a team that had a veteran quarterback or wasn't going to use him right away. Let him prove that he was a professional and that they could at least give him enough trust to maybe compete for a backup role and prove that he's going to be that dedicated guy that every coach that has worked with him said he's a baller. He's a maniacal worker. His problem is that he has a bad temper and that he shouldn't go out at night. And so he lets things bother him that he shouldn't off the field. On the field, it's not a problem, but off the field is a problem. And a lot of that's just a maturity thing. We could say the same thing about Jordan Lasley, I think, in certain regards, in terms of his immaturity, the receiver for the Ravens. But when you look at that, they say, give him a year, let him remake his body, so that if you do that, and people I know who study biomechanics and work in the league were like, let him remake his body. And that should reduce a lot of the injury issues that we saw from him, because he tried to get back on the field every time too fast. I mean, this is a guy that even after his knee injury was outrunning Georgia cornerbacks for 50 yards on plays that they had angles on him. I mean, this is a dual threat athlete that if Deshaun Watson, if Chad Kelly didn't have the blow up and make an ass out of himself, with his teammates and argue with the coaches and get kicked off because of the fact that he was so arrogant about and competitive in a hyper way, we might not have heard about Deshaun Jackson until this year. We very well might not have, because he was that good of a dual threat that he, as a high school quarterback. And the thing is that he's a fantastic pocket player too. And he's just so, I think this is what you're going to see as he learns the playbook, is that in the red zone, he's going to be decisive. On third down, he's going to be decisive. The ball's going to be where it's supposed to be. He's going to squeeze the ball into places where fans are going to be a little nervous about it at first. And if he continues to have success and make the right reads and get chemistry with the right guys, you're going to go, that's only a play that 5 players in the league can make. That kind of decisiveness and confidence and toughness. And he plays like he plays the way that he plays the game, the confidence which he plays and executes, and the quickness with which he reacts to things that happen on the field. He has that skill and carries himself the way that a 10-year veteran who has played at a high level in the NFL plays. Now, making pre and post snap reads, recognizing defenses in the NFL, all that's going to be an up and down process for him, like any other quarterback who enters the league, because he wasn't playing, at a highly sophisticated offense at Ole Miss. But at the same time, the things that are hard to teach, he has, and the athletic ability he has, the competitive fire and toughness, the maniacal work ethic. I think it's great, and I'm glad to see that. And it's nice to see that while Elway, from at least from my outsider's view, not anything that you've said to me, but from just like reading additional media to you, listening to people on Twitter, whatever, for whatever it's worth, there's an impression that Elway doesn't always, always kind of like, this is my thing. I think I'm right. And if he's the GM and the buck stops with him, you don't blame him for being that way. But it sounds like Vance Joseph has kind of probably been saying all along, look, this guy is ready to play right now. We don't want him to, he's not healthy enough, but he's trying to get on the field now. He can't wait. We've got someone with all the competitive fire at Trevor who has the physical ability of Paxton, and maybe more savvy than both of them, if we can get him to develop. And Kubiak obviously bought in, and Kubiak's been always back up and in the QB room with him. You can tell, if we're talking about duty, I'm sure that Elway's been told a few times that it does stink and that his doesn't, that he can't go on believing that delusion. I'm sure Kubiak has told him that a time or two. So I think that if he's on Chad Kelly's side, then, that gives him a chance. And I think that that's exciting for people, especially RSP subscribers who took my advice and said, get him at the end of your drafts. Just wait a few years. It's a low risk, tremendous reward possibility. And, I'll have fun when we go back to Mobile if Chad has a decent season, and I can talk a little trash with Mike Tanier.
Always fun talking to our man Mike Tanier. I got to get you and Alicia out here to Colorado, my friend. So that is a wrap for this evening's program. Many thanks to everyone out there. We've got Mother's Day coming up, and just on a personal moment, this is my first Mother's Day without my mom. So just kind of getting through this has been a challenge. I have to do commercials for Mother's Day, like, hey, check out, and I love Pro Flowers and Cherries Berries. I love them, and they're great products and all that. But, just going through that, and, I've moved in the new house and still unpacking things, running into cards or letters or just words of wisdoms, letters that she had written to me. A large message from her, and the power. Pritch always tells me, and Pritch lost his mom about a decade ago, but he always tells me it's just a different power that she has with you now. She's not gone. She just has a different power now. But one of the messages was just never quit. Never, ever quit. And I think that's something important to resonate with everyone. I want everyone to have a great Mother's Day. And I just want everyone to know, like, just the interactions and the positivity and, everything it's so helpful out there for all of us that are going through all this. I know other people that are, have lost their parents and all these sorts of things. And, it's good to have this community. It's good to have this group of football fans that we do, Matt, that, we're there for them. We always get the notes, hey, you guys help me through this and going through chemo, all these sorts of heavy things. Like, we're just talking about football, right? But we're helping people go through it. You're helping us. You're helping us get through this as well. So just never quit, go for your dreams, and, keep striving. Also in moving, as I'll show everyone, if you're listening, just watch the YouTube channel. Like, I've got some artwork of mine that I'm going to hang up in this room. This will be my studio and my art studio. So, I've got some artwork I've done, but on the never quit angle, Matt, I also have this. This was my one and only rejection letter from Homage Studios, which is Image Comics, basically. Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, all those guys, right? Rob Liefeld, who created Deadpool. This letter basically made me stop trying to go for my dream of being a comic book artist. It never should have. I have it framed now because I think of the person I am today and the advice that I'd gotten from my mom. And this was from a talent contest that Image had, and J. Scott Campbell won it, who's still a great artist today. He's actually here in Colorado. He won that back in the 90s, but that one letter made me stop and made me quit. So when we do run into people and, just thank you. When I go to Dallas and my Uber driver knows who I am when he picks me up, that's awesome. Love it. Love you guys for that. But when people say, like, how do I do it? How do I want to get into that? Just never quit. Just never quit. So Matt, thank you, kind friend, because you've always been there for me as well. So thank you guys out there. And Matt, I hope you guys have a great Mother's Day as well.
You too, Cecil. And, absolutely. It's about family, and family I always say that family isn't always blood, and blood isn't always family. Now, if you're fortunate to have both, then celebrate your blessings. And at the same time, I love what you discussed there and what you brought up. And I always look at it as that when bad things happen to you, it feels like crap, but crap's good fertilizer. So you want to make sure that all those bad experiences that you have do oftentimes create really good fertilizer for the good things that grow out of it. So just keep that in mind. And when you're going through it and it stinks and you're wading in it a little bit and you're getting dirty, just realize that you're preparing the ground, to grow something beautiful.
Excellent. He's Matt Waldman. Follow him on Twitter at Matt Waldman. I'm at Cecil Lammey. The show is at the Audible. Thanks. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.